Question 1. What factors determine the appropriate accounting treatment for revenue recognition at Topsports International to ensure compliance with Australian accounting standards and corporate governance principles? Option A. The timing of cash receipt from customers and the company's internal sales targets. Option B. The subjective assessment of future sales potential and the desire to present a consistent growth trajectory to investors. Option C. The volume of sales made during a promotional period and the perceived market demand for Topsports International's products. Option D. The transfer of control of goods or services to the customer and the ability to measure the transaction price reliably. Correct answer is A. The timing of cash receipt from customers and the company's internal sales targets. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because Topsports International, as a publicly listed company, operates under strict regulatory oversight concerning its financial reporting and disclosure obligations. Misrepresenting financial performance can lead to severe penalties, loss of investor confidence, and reputational damage. The pressure to meet market expectations or internal targets can create ethical dilemmas, requiring a strong commitment to integrity and compliance. The correct approach involves adhering strictly to accounting standards and regulatory guidelines when preparing financial reports. This means accurately reflecting the company's financial position and performance, even if it means reporting less favorable results. Regulatory frameworks, such as those governing listed companies in the relevant jurisdiction, assuming this assessment pertains to a specific jurisdiction, e.g., Australia under the Corporations Act 2001 and Australian accounting standards, mandate transparency and accuracy in financial disclosures. Ethical principles also demand honesty and integrity in all business dealings, including financial reporting. An incorrect approach of manipulating revenue recognition to artificially inflate reported sales figures would be a direct violation of accounting standards, e.g., OSF 15 revenue from contracts with customers, and potentially the Corporations Act 2001. This misrepresentation deceives stakeholders and undermines the reliability of financial information. Another incorrect approach of selectively disclosing positive financial information while withholding negative data constitutes misleading and deceptive conduct, violating disclosure requirements and ethical obligations of fair representation. Finally, an approach that prioritizes short-term performance targets over accurate reporting ignores the fundamental duty to provide a true and fair view of the company's financial health, leading to regulatory breaches and ethical compromise. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes compliance with all applicable laws, regulations, and accounting standards. This involves seeking clarification from legal and accounting experts when in doubt, maintaining meticulous records, and fostering a culture of ethical conduct within the organization. When faced with conflicting pressures, the professional's duty is to uphold the integrity of financial reporting, even if it leads to short-term negative consequences. Question 2. The audit findings indicate that a significant number of inventory discrepancies have been identified at several Topsports International retail locations, suggesting potential weaknesses in stock management procedures and possible instances of shrinkage. Which of the following represents the most appropriate immediate course of action for the internal audit team? Option A. Immediately report the inventory discrepancies to the relevant retail industry regulatory body, citing potential noncompliance with stock control regulations. Option B. Initiate a comprehensive review of the inventory management system and operational procedures at the affected Topsports International locations, collaborating with store management to identify root causes and develop a remediation plan. Option C. Disregard the findings as minor operational variances that do not warrant further attention from the internal audit department. Option D. Advise Topsports International store managers to adjust inventory records to match physical counts without further investigation to avoid negative audit reports. The correct answer is B. Initiate a comprehensive review of the inventory management system and operational procedures at the affected Topsports International locations, collaborating with store management to identify root causes and develop a remediation plan. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential breach of internal controls and regulatory compliance within Topsports International. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires immediate and decisive action to mitigate risks, protect the company's reputation, and ensure adherence to relevant regulations. The pressure to act quickly, coupled with the need for thorough investigation and accurate reporting, demands careful judgment. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented process of investigation, escalation, and remediation. This aligns with best practices in internal audit and corporate governance, which mandate that identified control weaknesses or potential noncompliance be addressed promptly and thoroughly. Specifically, it requires engaging with the relevant department to understand the root cause, implementing corrective actions, and documenting all steps taken. This ensures accountability and provides a clear audit trail, which is crucial for demonstrating compliance with Topsports International's internal policies and any applicable regulatory frameworks governing retail operations and financial reporting. An incorrect approach that involves overlooking the findings or attempting to resolve them informally without proper documentation and escalation fails to uphold the principles of good corporate governance and internal control. This can lead to recurring issues, significant financial losses, and reputational damage. Furthermore, it may constitute a breach of duty by management if they are aware of control deficiencies and fail to act. Another incorrect approach, such as immediately reporting the findings to external regulators without a proper internal investigation and remediation process, can be premature and damaging. While transparency is important, a rushed external report without full understanding or attempted resolution can create unnecessary alarm, damage relationships with regulatory bodies, and potentially lead to unwarranted penalties. It bypasses the company's own internal mechanisms for addressing issues, which are designed to be the first line of defense. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Understanding the nature and potential impact of the audit finding. 2. Consulting internal policies and procedures related to audit findings and control deficiencies. 3. Engaging with the affected department to gather more information and understand the context. 4. Developing and implementing a remediation plan with clear timelines and responsibilities. 5. Documenting all actions taken throughout the process. 6. Escalating the issue to senior management and relevant stakeholders as per internal protocols. 7. Considering external reporting obligations only after internal investigation and remediation efforts are exhausted, or if mandated by specific regulations. Question 3. The audit findings indicate that a recent data processing activity at Topsports International may have inadvertently exposed sensitive customer information due to an unpatched software vulnerability. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the head of compliance to ensure adherence to Topsports International's regulatory obligations? Option A. Request the marketing department to issue a general statement about data security enhancements to preemptively address potential customer concerns. Option B. Initiate an immediate internal investigation to determine the full scope of the exposure, isolate affected systems, and prepare for mandatory breach notification to relevant authorities and affected customers as per data protection laws. Option C. Instruct the audit team to review past data handling procedures to identify systemic weaknesses, deferring immediate action on the current exposure until the broader review is complete. Option D. Advise the IT department to patch the vulnerability and monitor systems for any signs of unauthorized access, without immediately reporting the incident to external parties. The correct answer is B. Initiate an immediate internal investigation to determine the full scope of the exposure, isolate affected systems, and prepare for mandatory breach notification to relevant authorities and affected customers as per data protection laws. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential breach of internal controls and regulatory compliance at Topsports International, specifically concerning the handling of customer data. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires immediate and decisive action to mitigate risk, protect customer privacy, and uphold the company's reputation, all while adhering to the strict data protection regulations applicable to Topsports International. The pressure to act quickly must be balanced with a thorough understanding of the legal and ethical obligations. The correct approach involves a systematic and transparent process of investigation, containment, and remediation, guided by the principles of data protection and privacy laws. This includes immediately isolating the affected systems, assessing the scope of the breach, notifying relevant authorities and affected individuals as mandated by law, and implementing corrective actions to prevent recurrence. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the identified risks in a manner consistent with regulatory requirements, demonstrating a commitment to responsible data stewardship and legal compliance. An incorrect approach would be to downplay the severity of the findings or to delay reporting the incident. Such actions would constitute a failure to comply with mandatory breach notification requirements, potentially leading to significant fines and legal penalties. Another incorrect approach would be to attempt to conceal the breach or to mislead stakeholders about its nature or extent. This would violate ethical principles of honesty and transparency and would likely exacerbate the legal and reputational damage. Furthermore, failing to conduct a thorough investigation and implement robust corrective measures would leave Topsports International vulnerable to future incidents, demonstrating a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the ongoing protection of customer data. Professionals facing similar situations should employ a structured decision-making process. This involves 1. Recognizing and acknowledging the seriousness of the audit findings. 2. Consulting relevant internal policies and external regulatory frameworks immediately. 3. Escalating the issue to the appropriate internal stakeholders, e.g., legal compliance. IT security. 4. Developing a clear action plan that prioritizes containment, investigation, and notification in accordance with legal obligations. 5. Documenting all actions taken and decisions made throughout the process. 6. Learning from the incident to strengthen future controls and procedures. Question 4. The audit findings indicate that a recent internal review at Topsports International has highlighted potential discrepancies in how customer purchase history data is accessed and utilized by various departments. An external auditor, conducting a review of Topsports International's compliance with data protection regulations, has requested direct access to raw customer transaction logs, including personally identifiable information, to assess the scope of data usage. Which of the following represents the most appropriate course of action for Topsports International in response to the auditor's request? Option A. Share the raw customer transaction logs with the external auditor via a secure, encrypted email, with a verbal assurance that the data will be handled confidentially. Option B. Provide the external auditor with anonymized and aggregated customer purchase data, explaining that direct access to raw, identifiable data is restricted by data privacy regulations, and offer to discuss the anonymized data further. Option C. Politely decline the external auditor's request for raw data, stating that such information cannot be shared under any circumstances, without offering any alternative data or discussion. Option D. Grant the external auditor full, unrestricted access to all raw customer transaction logs, including personally identifiable information, to ensure complete transparency during the audit. The correct answer is B. Provide the external auditor with anonymized and aggregated customer purchase data, explaining that direct access to raw, identifiable data is restricted by data privacy regulations, and offer to discuss the anonymized data further. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to balance the immediate need for information with the strict regulatory requirements governing data handling and client confidentiality. The auditor's request, while potentially useful for understanding Topsports International's operational context, directly conflicts with the principles of data privacy and the limitations on sharing sensitive client information without explicit consent or a clear legal basis. Careful judgment is required to avoid both obstructing a legitimate audit process and breaching regulatory obligations. The correct approach involves acknowledging the auditor's request, explaining the limitations imposed by data privacy regulations, and offering to provide anonymized or aggregated data that does not identify individual clients. This approach upholds regulatory compliance by protecting client confidentiality while still attempting to facilitate the audit by providing relevant, albeit restricted, information. This aligns with the principles of data protection and ethical conduct expected of professionals handling sensitive information, ensuring that Topsports International operates within legal boundaries. An incorrect approach that involves providing the raw, identifiable client data directly to the auditor without proper authorization or anonymization would constitute a significant breach of data privacy regulations. This failure to protect client information could lead to severe penalties, reputational damage, and loss of trust. Another incorrect approach which is to outright refuse any cooperation with the audit without offering alternative solutions, could be seen as obstructive and may violate internal company policies or contractual obligations related to audits. This lack of constructive engagement can create unnecessary friction and hinder the audit process. A third incorrect approach, which is to attempt to circumvent the regulations by sharing the data through informal channels or with a promise of discretion, is equally problematic as it still violates the spirit and letter of the law, exposing Topsports International to risk. Professionals should approach such situations by first understanding the specific regulatory framework governing data privacy and client confidentiality applicable to Topsports International. They should then assess the auditor's request against these regulations. If the request appears to conflict with regulations, the professional should communicate clearly and respectfully with the auditor, explaining the constraints and proposing compliant alternatives. This involves a proactive and transparent communication strategy, focusing on finding solutions that satisfy both the audit's informational needs and the company's legal and ethical obligations. Question 5. The audit findings indicate a pattern of sales representatives at Topsports International potentially exaggerating the capabilities of certain sports equipment to meet aggressive quarterly targets. Which of the following approaches best aligns with ethical sales practices and regulatory expectations for Topsports International? Option A. Accurately describe product features, benefits, and limitations to customers, ensuring they can make informed purchasing decisions. Option B. Encourage customers to rely on peer reviews and online forums for detailed product information rather than providing comprehensive details directly. Option C. Emphasize only the most positive aspects of the equipment, downplaying any potential drawbacks to secure sales. Option D. Provide customers with a general overview of the equipment's purpose, without detailing specific technical specifications or performance metrics. The correct answer is A. Accurately describe product features, benefits, and limitations to customers, ensuring they can make informed purchasing decisions. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Topsports International employees due to the potential conflict between achieving sales targets and adhering to ethical sales practices. The audit findings highlight a risk of misrepresenting product features to meet aggressive sales goals, which can erode customer trust and lead to regulatory scrutiny. Careful judgment is required to balance business objectives with ethical conduct and compliance. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a proactive and transparent communication strategy. Topsports International employees should accurately represent product features, benefits, and limitations, ensuring customers make informed purchasing decisions. This aligns with the principles of fair dealing and consumer protection, which are fundamental to maintaining a reputable brand and complying with relevant consumer laws and industry codes of conduct that prohibit misleading or deceptive representations. Incorrect approaches analysis. Misrepresenting product features to meet sales targets is ethically unsound and violates consumer protection laws that prohibit misleading and deceptive conduct. This approach prioritizes short-term gains over long-term customer relationships and brand integrity. Focusing solely on sales figures without considering the accuracy of product information can lead to customer dissatisfaction and potential complaints to regulatory bodies. This demonstrates a disregard for ethical sales practices and a failure to uphold the company's responsibility to provide truthful information. Ignoring customer feedback regarding product performance, especially when it suggests misrepresentation, is a failure to address potential compliance issues. This approach risks exacerbating problems and failing to identify and rectify systemic ethical breaches within the sales team. Professional reasoning. Professionals at Topsports International should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes integrity and compliance. This involves understanding the company's ethical code of conduct and relevant consumer protection regulations. When faced with pressure to meet targets, employees should first assess the ethical implications of their proposed actions. If there is any doubt about the accuracy or truthfulness of a representation, they should seek clarification from supervisors or relevant departments. The ultimate goal is to achieve business success through honest and ethical means, fostering trust with customers and stakeholders. Question 6. The audit findings indicate that certain customer onboarding procedures at Topsports International may not fully align with the latest regulatory guidelines concerning data privacy and customer verification, Which of the following approaches best addresses this situation to ensure ongoing compliance? Option A. Disregard the audit findings as a minor procedural oversight and continue with the existing customer onboarding processes, assuming they have been adequate in the past. Option B. Seek an informal opinion from a long-standing senior manager within Topsports International regarding the interpretation of the audit findings and proceed based on their experience. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive review of Topsports International's current customer onboarding policies and procedures, comparing them directly against the specific requirements outlined in the audit findings and the relevant regulatory framework to identify and rectify any discrepancies. Option D. Immediately implement a company-wide overhaul of all operational procedures to preemptively address potential compliance issues, assuming the audit findings are indicative of broader systemic weaknesses. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive review of Topsports International's current customer onboarding policies and procedures, comparing them directly against the specific requirements outlined in the audit findings and the relevant regulatory framework to identify and rectify any discrepancies. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Topsports International's compliance team due to the potential for misinterpreting or misapplying internal policies in light of evolving regulatory expectations. The challenge lies in balancing the need for efficient operations with the imperative to maintain robust compliance, especially when audit findings suggest a gap. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any corrective actions are not only effective, but also align with the spirit and letter of applicable regulations, thereby safeguarding the company's reputation and avoiding potential penalties. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough review of Topsports International's existing internal policies against the specific requirements identified in the audit findings and the relevant regulatory framework. This approach is professionally sound because it directly addresses the identified compliance gap by ensuring that internal controls and procedures are updated to meet current regulatory standards. This proactive and evidence-based method demonstrates a commitment to compliance and risk mitigation, aligning with the principles of good corporate governance and the regulatory expectations for businesses operating within the specified jurisdiction. It prioritizes accuracy and adherence to legal obligations. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing immediate, broad changes to all operational procedures without a targeted analysis of the audit findings and regulatory requirements is an incorrect approach. This could lead to unnecessary disruption, increased costs, and potentially introduce new compliance risks if the changes are not well conceived or aligned with actual needs. It fails to demonstrate a systematic and data-driven approach to compliance. Relying solely on the interpretation of a single senior manager without cross-referencing with the audit report and relevant regulations is also an incorrect approach. This introduces a significant risk of bias and personal judgment overriding objective compliance requirements, potentially leading to a failure to address the root cause of the audit findings or to comply with specific legal obligations. It bypasses the necessary due diligence and validation steps. Ignoring the audit findings altogether and continuing with existing practices is the most egregious incorrect approach. This demonstrates a willful disregard for internal controls and external regulatory oversight, exposing Topsports International to significant legal, financial, and reputational risks. It is a direct contravention of the principles of accountability and regulatory adherence. Professional reasoning. Professionals at Topsports International should adopt a structured decision-making process when faced with audit findings. This process should begin with a clear understanding of the audit report's specific concerns and the underlying regulatory context. The next step involves a detailed comparative analysis of existing internal policies and procedures against these findings and regulations. Based on this analysis, a targeted action plan should be developed, prioritizing corrective measures that directly address the identified gaps. Regular monitoring and review of the implemented changes are crucial to ensure ongoing compliance and to adapt to any future regulatory shifts. This systematic approach ensures that compliance efforts are effective, efficient, and legally sound. Question 7. Cost-benefit analysis shows that a new potential supplier for Topsports International offers a 20% reduction in manufacturing costs. However, Preliminary inquiries suggest this supplier operates in a region with less stringent labor and environmental regulations. What is the most appropriate course of action for Topsports International's procurement and compliance departments? Option A. Reject the new supplier outright due to the potential regulatory and ethical concerns, regardless of the cost savings. Option B. Negotiate a slightly lower discount with the new supplier to offset the potential risks associated with their operating region. Option C. Proceed with the new supplier immediately due to the significant cost savings, assuming their self-reported compliance is sufficient. Option D. Conduct comprehensive due diligence, including independent verification of the supplier's labor, environmental, and ethical practices before making a decision. The correct answer is C. Proceed with the new supplier immediately due to the significant cost savings, assuming their self-reported compliance is sufficient. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Topsports International's compliance team due to the inherent conflict between maximizing profit and adhering to regulatory requirements. The pressure to secure a new supplier, especially one offering significant cost savings, can create a temptation to overlook potential red flags. Careful judgment is required to balance business objectives with the imperative of regulatory compliance and ethical conduct. The correct approach involves a thorough due diligence process that prioritizes regulatory compliance and ethical considerations over immediate cost benefits. This entails verifying the supplier's adherence to all relevant labor laws, environmental standards, and anti-corruption regulations within their operating jurisdiction. Specifically, Topsports International must ensure the supplier's practices align with the principles of fair labor, safe working conditions, and responsible environmental stewardship, as mandated by the Topsports International Hiring Assessment Tests Governing Framework. This proactive stance mitigates legal risks, reputational damage, and potential supply chain disruptions. An incorrect approach that prioritizes only the cost savings without adequate verification would be professionally unacceptable. This failure to conduct thorough due diligence constitutes a breach of regulatory obligations and ethical standards. It exposes Topsports International to significant risks, including potential fines, legal action, and severe damage to its brand image if the supplier is found to be engaging in exploitative labor practices, environmental violations, or corrupt activities. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on the supplier's stated compliance without independent verification, also falls short. This reliance on self-reporting without independent audits or checks is insufficient to meet the rigorous standards expected of a responsible corporation and can lead to overlooking systemic issues. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying all applicable regulatory requirements and ethical guidelines. This framework should then involve a risk assessment of potential suppliers, followed by a comprehensive due diligence process that includes independent verification of compliance claims. The decision to engage a supplier should be contingent upon satisfactory evidence of their adherence to all legal and ethical standards, even if it means foregoing immediate cost advantages. Prioritizing long-term sustainability and corporate responsibility over short-term gains is paramount. Question 8. Risk assessment procedures indicate that Topsports International's marketing team is developing a new campaign for its latest athletic footwear. The campaign aims to emphasize the shoe's ability to enhance athletic performance. However, internal discussions reveal a tension between the desire to make bold, attention-grabbing claims and the need to ensure these claims are factually accurate and legally compliant with advertising regulations. Which of the following approaches best navigates this tension while upholding regulatory and ethical standards for Topsports International? Option A. Use subjective testimonials from a few satisfied customers to illustrate the perceived benefits without needing to verify the objective performance improvements. Option B. Ensure all claims about performance enhancement are directly supported by verifiable scientific data or independent testing results, even if this means toning down the marketing message. Option C. Focus on aspirational language and highlight the potential for improved performance, assuming consumers understand that these are not guaranteed outcomes. Option D. Prioritize making claims that are more impressive than those of competitors, regardless of the absolute truthfulness of the claims made about Topsports International's products. The correct answer is C. Focus on aspirational language and highlight the potential for improved performance, assuming consumers understand that these are not guaranteed outcomes. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge for Topsports international employees due to the inherent conflict between promoting company products and adhering to strict advertising standards designed to protect consumers. The need for careful judgment arises from the potential for misleading claims to damage consumer trust, attract regulatory scrutiny, and ultimately harm the company's reputation and financial performance. Navigating this requires a deep understanding of the applicable regulatory framework. The correct approach involves prioritizing factual accuracy and substantiation for all marketing claims, even when faced with pressure to highlight aspirational benefits. This aligns with the core principles of consumer protection legislation, which mandates that advertising must not be misleading or deceptive. Specifically, it requires that any claims made about product performance or benefits must be supported by credible evidence. This ethical and regulatory imperative ensures that consumers can make informed purchasing decisions based on reality, not exaggeration. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on aggressive sales targets without verifying the truthfulness of claims would fail to meet regulatory obligations. This could lead to violations of advertising standards, resulting in fines, corrective advertising orders, and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach that relies on vague or subjective statements that cannot be objectively proven would also be problematic, as it skirts the line of deception and fails to provide consumers with meaningful information. Furthermore, an approach that prioritizes competitor disparagement over accurate self-promotion would be unethical and potentially illegal, as it shifts focus away from the product's merits and towards undermining others, which is not a permissible marketing strategy. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the specific regulatory requirements for advertising and marketing. This involves consulting internal compliance guidelines and relevant external regulations. When developing marketing materials, the process should include a mandatory review stage where claims are rigorously checked for accuracy and verifiability. If there is any doubt about the substantiation of a claim, it should be revised or omitted. This proactive approach minimizes risk and upholds ethical standards. Question 9. The audit findings indicate that a senior buyer at Topsports International has a close personal relationship with the owner of a key supplier company. This relationship was not disclosed, and the buyer has been instrumental in approving several significant contracts with this supplier. What is the most appropriate course of action for the senior buyer to take immediately upon realizing the potential conflict of interest? Option A. Wait for the ongoing audit to conclude and address any findings directly with the auditors regarding the relationship. Option B. Immediately disclose the personal relationship and the extent of their involvement in contract approvals to their direct manager and the compliance department, requesting guidance on how to proceed. Option C. Continue to approve contracts with the supplier as usual, but ensure all documentation is meticulously kept to demonstrate the fairness of the decisions if questioned later. Option D. Discuss the situation with trusted colleagues in the procurement department to gauge their opinions on how to best handle the disclosure. The correct answer is B. Immediately disclose the personal relationship and the extent of their involvement in contract approvals to their direct manager and the compliance department, requesting guidance on how to proceed. Explanation: the audit findings indicate a potential conflict of interest within Topsports International's procurement department. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the employee to navigate ethical obligations, company policy, and potential regulatory compliance without explicit guidance. The employee must exercise sound judgment to protect Topsports International from reputational damage, financial loss, and potential legal repercussions. The correct approach involves immediate and transparent disclosure of the potential conflict to the designated authority within Topsports International, as per the company's internal policies and general ethical principles governing employee conduct. This demonstrates integrity and allows the company to manage the situation appropriately, such as recusing the employee from the decision-making process or conducting an independent review. This aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and the duty of loyalty owed by an employee to their employer, which are implicitly or explicitly covered by employment contracts and company codes of conduct, often reinforced by broader regulatory expectations for financial services firms regarding integrity and conflicts of interest. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the procurement decision without disclosure, hoping the relationship remains undetected. This fails to uphold the duty of loyalty and could lead to decisions not being made in the best interest of Topsports International, potentially resulting in inflated costs or substandard goods/services. This breaches ethical standards and could violate internal policies designed to prevent conflicts of interest, which are often a precursor to regulatory scrutiny. Another incorrect approach would be to discuss the situation with colleagues in the department before reporting it. This risks creating a culture of noncompliance, potentially influencing others to overlook similar issues, and could be seen as an attempt to circumvent proper reporting channels. It also exposes Topsports International to a wider risk of information leakage and inconsistent handling of conflicts. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to ignore the situation and hope it resolves itself. This passive stance abdicates responsibility and leaves Topsports International vulnerable to the consequences of an undisclosed conflict of interest. It demonstrates a lack of professional diligence and a disregard for the potential harm to the company. Professionals should adopt a proactive and transparent approach when faced with potential conflicts of interest. The decision-making framework involves 1. Identifying the potential conflict. 2. Consulting company policy and relevant ethical guidelines. 3. Disclosing the conflict to the appropriate person or department immediately. 4. Following the company's established procedures for managing the conflict. This ensures accountability and protects the interests of all stakeholders. Question 10. Benchmark analysis indicates that Topsports International is considering expanding its international operations, which necessitates a rapid increase in hiring. A proposal has been put forward to streamline the existing Topsports International hiring assessment test by reducing the number of psychometric evaluations and introducing a more generalized skills-based interview for all new roles across different departments. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the principles of the Topsports International Hiring Assessment Test Framework? Option A. Conduct a pilot program of the proposed streamlined assessment in one new branch, gathering data on candidate performance and feedback before a full rollout, while ensuring the core objectives of the Topsports International Hiring Assessment Test are maintained. Option B. Proceed with the generalized skills-based interview only, as it is more cost-effective and quicker to administer, and discontinue the psychometric evaluations entirely for all new hires. Option C. Delegate the decision-making authority for the assessment modifications to the hiring managers of the new international branches, allowing them to adapt the Topsports International Hiring Assessment Test as they see fit to meet local hiring needs. Option D. Implement the proposed streamlined assessment process immediately to expedite hiring for new international branches, ensuring all candidates undergo the reduced number of psychometric tests and the generalized skills-based interview. Correct answer is D. Implement the proposed streamlined assessment process immediately to expedite hiring for new international branches, ensuring all candidates undergo the reduced number of psychometric tests and the generalized skills-based interview. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire for rapid expansion and the regulatory imperative to ensure all new ventures comply with Topsports International's established hiring assessment test framework. The pressure to onboard new staff quickly can lead to shortcuts, potentially compromising the integrity and fairness of the assessment process. Careful judgment is required to balance business needs with regulatory adherence. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the proposed assessment modifications against the existing Topsports International Hiring Assessment Test guidelines. This ensures that any changes maintain the core objectives of the assessment, such as evaluating candidate suitability for roles within the company, and do not inadvertently introduce bias or reduce the effectiveness of the evaluation. Regulatory justification lies in adhering to the internal policies and standards set forth by Topsports International for its hiring processes, which are designed to ensure consistency, fairness, and compliance with employment law principles. An incorrect approach that prioritizes speed over compliance would fail to adequately assess the impact of proposed changes on the validity and reliability of the hiring assessment. This could lead to the adoption of a flawed assessment that does not accurately identify suitable candidates or, worse, discriminates against certain groups, violating both internal company policy and potentially employment legislation. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on cost reduction without considering the assessment's purpose, risks undermining the quality of hires and the overall effectiveness of the recruitment strategy. This disregards the fundamental objective of the hiring assessment, which is to identify the best fit for the role and the company culture. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with clearly understanding the objectives of the hiring assessment and the specific regulatory requirements of the Topsports International Hiring Assessment Test. They should then critically evaluate any proposed changes against these established criteria, seeking expert advice if necessary. The decision should be based on a comprehensive risk assessment that considers the potential impact on candidate quality, fairness, and compliance, rather than solely on expediency or cost. Question 11. The audit findings indicate that Topsports International has experienced an increase in customer complaints regarding the quality of certain athletic footwear. A specific customer has lodged a complaint about a pair of shoes purchased 3 months ago, stating they have developed significant defects that render them unfit for their intended use, despite the company's standard 30-day return policy. Which approach should Topsports International employees prioritize when handling this customer's complaint to ensure compliance with consumer protection principles and maintain customer trust? Option A. Dismiss the complaint as a result of normal wear and tear, assuming the customer's usage has exceeded reasonable expectations. Option B. Inform the customer that the complaint is outside the 30-day return period and therefore cannot be addressed. Focusing on meeting current sales targets. Option C. Offer the customer a small discount on a future purchase as a gesture of goodwill, without investigating the product's quality issues. Option D. Investigate the complaint thoroughly, gather evidence of the alleged defects, and assess the situation against Topsports International's warranty policy and relevant consumer protection laws, offering a fair resolution based on the findings. The correct answer is D. Investigate the complaint thoroughly, gather evidence of the alleged defects, and assess the situation against Topsports International's warranty policy and relevant consumer protection laws, offering a fair resolution based on the findings. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Topsports International employees due to the inherent conflict between business objectives and regulatory compliance. The pressure to meet sales targets can create an environment where employees might be tempted to overlook or misrepresent information, especially when dealing with customer complaints. This requires careful judgment to ensure that customer satisfaction and adherence to consumer protection laws are prioritized over short-term sales gains. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough and objective investigation of the customer's complaint, gathering all relevant evidence, and applying Topsports International's internal policies and relevant consumer protection regulations to determine a fair resolution. This demonstrates a commitment to customer service, upholds ethical business practices, and ensures compliance with consumer rights legislation, which typically mandates that goods sold must be of satisfactory quality, fit for purpose, and as described. By addressing the complaint directly and fairly, Topsports International mitigates the risk of reputational damage and potential legal repercussions. Incorrect approaches analysis. Prioritizing sales targets over the complaint resolution would be an ethical and regulatory failure. This approach neglects the customer's rights and could violate consumer protection laws that require businesses to provide redress for faulty goods. It also damages customer trust and brand reputation. Dismissing the complaint without proper investigation, based solely on the fact that the return period has technically expired, is also problematic. While return periods are common, consumer protection laws often provide rights beyond these stated periods if a product is inherently faulty or not of satisfactory quality. This approach risks contravening these broader legal obligations, offering a minimal or unsatisfactory resolution to quickly close the case, without a genuine attempt to address the customer's concerns or investigate the product's alleged defect, is another failure. This demonstrates a lack of good faith and can lead to further escalation, negative reviews, and potential regulatory scrutiny for unfair trading practices. Professional reasoning. Professionals at Topsports International should adopt a framework that prioritizes ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Actively listening to and acknowledging customer concerns. 2. Conducting a fair and impartial investigation, gathering all necessary facts and evidence. 3. Applying internal policies and relevant laws consistently. 4. Communicating the resolution clearly and transparently to the customer. 5. Documenting the process and outcome for future reference and audit purposes. This systematic approach ensures that business decisions are made responsibly and in line with legal and ethical standards. Question 12. The audit findings indicate that a senior buyer at Topsports International has a close personal friendship with a key sales representative from a major supplier. This friendship predates the buyer's current role and involves frequent social interactions. The buyer is currently involved in evaluating bids for a significant contract with this supplier. What is the most appropriate course of action for the senior buyer to take in this situation? Option A. Proceed with the evaluation and award the contract if the supplier's bid is the most competitive, assuming their personal relationship will not influence their decision. Option B. Continue with the evaluation process, relying on their professional judgment to remain objective, and only disclose the relationship if specifically asked. Option C. Immediately disclose the personal relationship to their direct manager and the compliance department, and recuse themselves from all aspects of the evaluation and decision-making process for this supplier's contract. Option D. Inform the supplier's sales representative that they can no longer socialize with them to avoid any perception of impropriety. The correct answer is C. Immediately disclose the personal relationship to their direct manager and the compliance department, and recuse themselves from all aspects of the evaluation and decision-making process for this supplier's contract. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential conflict of interest within Topsports International's procurement department. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the employee to navigate a situation where personal relationships could influence business decisions, potentially compromising the integrity of Topsports International's operations and its adherence to regulatory standards. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all procurement activities are conducted impartially and in the best interest of the company, free from undue influence. The correct approach involves immediate and transparent disclosure of the relationship to the appropriate authority within Topsports International, such as the compliance officer or a designated manager, and recusal from any decision-making processes involving the supplier in question. This aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and ethical conduct expected of employees in regulated industries. Specifically, it upholds the duty of loyalty owed to the employer and prevents any appearance or reality of impropriety. This proactive disclosure ensures that Topsports International can implement appropriate controls to mitigate the conflict, such as assigning oversight of the supplier to an independent party. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the procurement decision without disclosure, assuming personal integrity is sufficient to prevent bias. This fails to acknowledge the objective standard of avoiding even the appearance of a conflict of interest, which is often a key tenet of regulatory compliance and internal codes of conduct. Another incorrect approach would be to downplay the significance of the relationship or to attempt to manage it independently without informing the company. This demonstrates a lack of understanding of the importance of transparency and accountability in corporate dealings, and could lead to breaches of internal policies and potentially regulatory breaches if such conflicts are explicitly prohibited or require reporting. A further incorrect approach would be to terminate the personal relationship solely to avoid the conflict without disclosing the initial situation. While this might seem like a solution, it bypasses the company's established procedures for managing conflicts and misses the opportunity for the company to implement its own safeguards. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes transparency, adherence to company policy, and ethical conduct. When a potential conflict of interest arises, the first step should always be to consult the company's code of conduct or conflict of interest policy. If such a policy exists, it will outline the specific reporting procedures. If there is any ambiguity, seeking guidance from a compliance officer or legal counsel is crucial. The overarching principle is to act in the best interest of the employer and to maintain the highest standards of integrity, thereby safeguarding both the company's reputation and its compliance standing. Question 13. Process analysis reveals that Topsports International has identified a significant, unforeseen operational issue that could potentially impact its quarterly earnings. A senior executive is considering informing a few key financial analysts about this issue before the official earnings release. Which of the following represents the most appropriate course of action for Topsports International? Option A. Delay any disclosure of the operational issue until after the official earnings release, hoping the impact will be minimal. Option B. Inform only the company's board of directors and senior management about the operational issue. Option C. Conduct a thorough assessment of the operational issue's potential impact on Topsports International's financial performance and consult with the legal and compliance departments to determine the appropriate disclosure timing and method according to relevant securities regulations. Option D. Immediately inform the selected financial analysts about the operational issue to allow them to prepare their reports. The correct answer is D. Immediately inform the selected financial analysts about the operational issue to allow them to prepare their reports. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Topsports International, as a publicly listed entity, operates under strict regulatory scrutiny. The decision-maker must navigate the delicate balance between providing timely and accurate information to stakeholders and adhering to disclosure obligations. The core of the challenge lies in identifying what constitutes material information that requires immediate public disclosure versus information that can be managed internally or disclosed at a later, appropriate time. Misjudging this can lead to insider trading allegations, market manipulation concerns, or reputational damage. The correct approach involves a systematic evaluation of the information's potential impact on Topsports International's share price and its significance to investors. This requires consulting with legal and compliance departments to ensure all actions align with the relevant securities laws and stock exchange listing rules. Specifically, the approach that prioritizes a thorough assessment of materiality, consultation with legal counsel, and adherence to established disclosure policies is correct. This aligns with the principles of fair disclosure and market integrity, preventing selective disclosure and ensuring all investors have access to the same critical information simultaneously. An incorrect approach would be to disclose the information immediately to a select group of analysts or investors without a formal public announcement. This constitutes selective disclosure, a practice that violates fair disclosure regulations and can lead to accusations of providing preferential treatment, thereby disadvantaging other market participants. Another incorrect approach would be to delay disclosure indefinitely, hoping the issue resolves itself, without considering the potential for the information to become material and the obligation to inform the market. This failure to disclose material information in a timely manner can also lead to regulatory sanctions. Finally, an approach that focuses solely on the internal operational impact without considering the external market implications would be flawed, as it neglects the broader regulatory and ethical responsibilities to investors. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the nature of the information. Next, they must assess its potential materiality by considering its impact on the company's financial performance, business operations, and stock price. This assessment should be followed by consultation with the company's legal and compliance teams to interpret the relevant regulatory requirements. The framework should then guide the decision on the appropriate disclosure mechanism, ensuring it is timely, accurate, and disseminated to all market participants simultaneously. Question 14. Process analysis reveals that a Topsports International employee has received an email containing sensitive client financial details. The employee believes a colleague in a different department might benefit from this information for a project they are both peripherally involved in, but the colleague has not explicitly requested it. What is the most appropriate course of action for the employee to take regarding this client information? Option A. Forward the email to their personal email address to ensure they have access to it outside of work hours. Option B. Verify the colleague's need for the information, confirm their authorization to receive it, and adhere to Topsports International's data protection policies before any potential disclosure. Option C. Forward the email to the colleague, assuming they will find it useful for their project. Option D. Discuss the client's financial situation in detail with another colleague in the company cafeteria. The correct answer is C. Forward the email to the colleague, assuming they will find it useful for their project. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Topsports International employees regarding the appropriate handling of sensitive client information. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need for efficient internal communication and collaboration with the paramount obligation to protect client data from unauthorized disclosure. Misjudging this balance can lead to serious regulatory breaches, reputational damage, and loss of client trust. Careful judgment is required to discern when information sharing is permissible and when it constitutes a breach of confidentiality. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding of Topsports International's internal data protection policies, which are designed to align with relevant regulatory frameworks. This approach prioritizes verifying the necessity and legitimacy of sharing information, ensuring that any disclosure is to authorized personnel for a specific, legitimate business purpose, and that appropriate security measures are in place. This aligns with the ethical duty of confidentiality and regulatory requirements that mandate the protection of client data. For instance, if Topsports International operates within a jurisdiction with data protection laws similar to GDPR or CCPA, sharing client data without a clear legal basis or consent would be a violation. The correct approach emphasizes a risk-averse strategy, seeking clarification or approval when in doubt, thereby upholding professional integrity and compliance. Incorrect approach is analysis. Sharing client information with a colleague in another department without confirming their direct involvement in the project or the necessity of their access represents a failure to adhere to data minimization principles and the principle of least privilege. This could lead to unauthorized access and potential breaches of confidentiality, violating internal policies and potentially regulatory mandates that require data to be accessed only by those who need it for a specific purpose. Forwarding client emails containing sensitive details to a personal email address for safekeeping is a severe breach of security protocols and confidentiality. This action exposes client data to significant risks, including potential interception, loss, or unauthorized access on a less secure personal device. It directly contravenes the duty to protect client information and would likely violate data protection regulations that require data to be stored and processed within secure, approved environments. Discussing client details in a public area, such as a cafeteria or during a commute, even if seemingly overheard by no one, is unprofessional and creates an unacceptable risk of incidental disclosure. This violates the expectation of privacy for clients and demonstrates a lack of diligence in safeguarding sensitive information. It undermines the trust placed in Topsports International and could lead to reputational damage and regulatory scrutiny. Professional reasoning. Professionals at Topsports International should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the nature of the information and its sensitivity. Next, they must consult internal policies and relevant regulatory guidelines to understand the permissible uses and disclosures of such information. When faced with a situation involving client data, the professional should ask, is this disclosure strictly necessary for a legitimate business purpose? And am I authorized to share this information with this specific individual or group? If there is any doubt, the professional should err on the side of caution, seek guidance from their supervisor or the compliance department, and prioritize data security and confidentiality above all else. This proactive and policy-driven approach ensures both ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. Question 15. Process analysis reveals that a long-standing client of Topsports International, who has recently expressed significant dissatisfaction with their investment performance, has offered a substantial personal gift to a senior financial advisor. The client has stated this is a gesture of goodwill and a way to ensure continued excellent service. The advisor is aware that accepting such a gift could be perceived as a conflict of interest and may violate internal policies and regulatory guidelines regarding client inducements. Option A. Accept the gift as a sign of appreciation for the client's loyalty and then discreetly inform compliance. Option B. Accept the gift and then research the relevant regulations to determine if it needs to be reported. Option C. Politely decline the gift, explaining that company policy and regulatory requirements prevent acceptance and offer to discuss the client's performance concerns. Option D. Accept the gift after consulting with the compliance department to understand any reporting requirements or restrictions. The correct answer is D. Accept the gift after consulting with the compliance department to understand any reporting requirements or restrictions. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for Topsports International employees due to the inherent conflict between client relationships and regulatory compliance. The need to maintain positive business relationships must be balanced against the strict requirements of the regulatory framework governing financial advisory services. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any actions taken do not inadvertently lead to breaches of these regulations, which could result in significant penalties for both the individual and the company. The correct approach involves a proactive and transparent communication strategy that prioritizes regulatory adherence. By immediately informing the compliance department and seeking their guidance, Topsports International employees demonstrate a commitment to upholding the law and internal policies. This aligns with the ethical obligation to act with integrity and to avoid any appearance of impropriety. The regulatory framework emphasizes the importance of robust internal controls and reporting mechanisms to prevent misconduct. Seeking compliance's input ensures that any decision made is fully compliant and documented, thereby protecting the company and its clients. An incorrect approach that involves proceeding with the client's request without consulting compliance fails to acknowledge the potential regulatory implications. This could lead to a breach of rules concerning client inducements, conflicts of interest, or the provision of advice that is not in the client's best interest, depending on the specific nature of the favors. Another incorrect approach, which is to ignore the request and hope it goes away, is also professionally unacceptable. This passive stance does not address the potential ethical or regulatory issue, and could be interpreted as a failure to act responsibly or to protect the client's interests. Finally, attempting to find a loophole or a way to circumvent the regulations, even with good intentions, is a direct violation of the spirit and letter of the law and demonstrates a lack of integrity. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying potential ethical and regulatory conflicts. This should be followed by consulting relevant internal policies and external regulations. When in doubt, seeking guidance from the compliance department or legal counsel is paramount. Documenting all communications and decisions throughout the process is crucial for accountability and protection. Question 16. Upon reviewing a potential new supplier for Topsports International's upcoming marketing campaign, you discover that the owner of this promising supplier is a close personal friend from university, and they have subtly hinted at offering you a significant personal finder's fee if the deal goes through. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Accept the finder's fee from the supplier once the contract is signed, as it represents a reward for your efforts in identifying and securing a valuable partner for Topsports International. Option B. Immediately disclose the personal relationship and the potential finder's fee to your direct manager and the compliance department, and recuse yourself from any further involvement in the supplier selection process. Option C. Inform the supplier that while you appreciate the offer, you cannot accept any personal benefits due to company policy, but continue to lead the evaluation process to ensure Topsports International gets the best possible outcome. Option D. Proceed with evaluating the supplier based on merit, assuming the personal relationship will not influence your professional judgment, and consider the finder's fee as a potential bonus for securing a good deal for Topsports International. The correct answer is B. Immediately disclose the personal relationship and the potential finder's fee to your direct manager and the compliance department, and recuse yourself from any further involvement in the supplier selection process. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Topsports International employee due to the inherent conflict between a potential business opportunity and the company's ethical obligations and regulatory compliance. The need for careful judgment arises from the potential for personal gain to influence business decisions, which could lead to reputational damage, legal repercussions, and a breach of trust with stakeholders. The correct approach involves prioritizing transparency and adherence to Topsports International's internal policies and relevant regulatory frameworks. This means immediately disclosing the potential conflict of interest to the appropriate internal authority, such as a compliance officer or direct manager, and recusing oneself from any decision-making processes related to the supplier. This approach is ethically sound and legally compliant because it upholds principles of good corporate governance, prevents insider trading or preferential treatment, and ensures that business decisions are made in the best interest of Topsports International, not for personal enrichment. It aligns with the fundamental regulatory expectation that employees act with integrity and avoid situations that could compromise their professional judgment. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the supplier relationship without disclosure, hoping to leverage the personal connection for a better deal for Topsports International. This is ethically flawed as it creates a hidden conflict of interest and is potentially illegal if it involves undisclosed personal benefits or constitutes a breach of fiduciary duty. Another incorrect approach would be to accept the personal gift from the supplier, even if the business deal is not yet finalized. This could be construed as a bribe or an inducement, violating anti-bribery and corruption regulations and undermining the integrity of the procurement process. A third incorrect approach would be to delay disclosure until after the deal is secured, attempting to justify it as a reward for successful negotiation. This is a clear violation of disclosure requirements and demonstrates a lack of integrity, as it seeks to circumvent the spirit and letter of ethical conduct policies. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying potential conflicts of interest. This involves a proactive assessment of any situation where personal interests could interfere with professional duties. The next step is to consult relevant company policies and codes of conduct, followed by seeking guidance from the compliance department or legal counsel. Transparency and timely disclosure are paramount. If a conflict is identified, the professional should recuse themselves from any decision-making capacity related to that conflict. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are made ethically, legally, and in the best interest of the organization. Question 17. Process analysis reveals that Topsports International is experiencing a temporary downturn in sales, and the upcoming quarterly earnings report is projected to be below market expectations. A senior executive is considering adjusting accounting estimates for inventory obsolescence to present a more favorable profit margin for the quarter. What is the most appropriate course of action for the executive to take? Option A. Consult with the audit committee and external auditors to ensure all accounting treatments are compliant with relevant accounting standards and regulatory requirements, even if it results in a less favorable reported outcome. Option B. Delay the recognition of certain sales until the following quarter to smooth out earnings and avoid negative market reactions. Option C. Provide a qualitative explanation in the earnings release about the temporary sales dip without altering the financial statements. Option D. Adjust accounting estimates for inventory obsolescence to align with the company's historical performance and present a more stable financial outlook. The correct answer is D. Adjust accounting estimates for inventory obsolescence to align with the company's historical performance and present a more stable financial outlook. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Topsports International, as a publicly listed entity, is subject to stringent regulatory oversight concerning its financial reporting and disclosures. The pressure to meet market expectations and the potential for personal gain create a conflict of interest, requiring careful judgment to uphold ethical and legal standards. The correct approach involves prioritizing transparency and adherence to accounting standards. This means accurately reflecting the financial position of Topsports International, even if it means reporting a less favorable outcome in the short term. This aligns with the fundamental principles of financial integrity and regulatory compliance, such as those mandated by the relevant securities laws and accounting standards that govern public companies. Specifically, it upholds the duty to provide true and fair financial information to investors and the market, preventing misleading statements that could lead to market manipulation or investor losses. An incorrect approach that involves manipulating financial data to present a more optimistic picture would constitute a serious breach of regulatory requirements. This could involve recognizing revenue prematurely or deferring expenses inappropriately, which are forms of accounting fraud. Such actions violate the principles of accurate financial reporting and could lead to severe penalties, including fines, sanctions, and reputational damage for both the individuals involved and Topsports International. Furthermore, it undermines investor confidence and the integrity of the financial markets. Another incorrect approach, such as selectively disclosing information to favored stakeholders, would violate principles of equal disclosure and market fairness. Public companies have a responsibility to disseminate material information to all shareholders and the market simultaneously. Selective disclosure can lead to insider trading allegations and breaches of market abuse regulations. The professional decision-making framework that should be applied in such situations involves a multi-step process. First, identify the ethical and regulatory obligations. Second, gather all relevant facts and understand the potential consequences of different actions. Third, consult with internal compliance or legal departments or external advisors if necessary. Fourth, consider the impact on all stakeholders, including shareholders, employees, and the public. Finally, choose the course of action that best upholds integrity, transparency, and legal compliance, even if it is the more difficult path. Question 18. Operational review demonstrates that Topsports International is facing significant pressure from investors to maintain its projected earnings growth for the upcoming quarter. However, internal assessments indicate that a substantial inventory obsolescence issue, previously underestimated, will likely result in a material write-down that will negatively impact reported profits. The finance team is considering several options to address this situation before the quarterly report is finalized. Which of the following approaches best aligns with regulatory requirements and ethical financial reporting practices for Topsports International? Option A. Focus on highlighting positive operational achievements and revenue growth in the report, downplaying the significance of the inventory obsolescence issue in the footnotes. Option B. Immediately recognize the full extent of the inventory obsolescence write-down in the current quarter's financial statements, regardless of the impact on reported earnings, and provide clear disclosures regarding the reasons for the write-down. Option C. Delay the recognition of the full inventory obsolescence write-down by spreading it over multiple future quarters, arguing that the exact impact is still being finalized. Option D. Reclassify a portion of the obsolete inventory as slow-moving to reduce the immediate impact of the write-down, while continuing to monitor the situation. The correct answer is B. Immediately recognize the full extent of the inventory obsolescence write-down in the current quarter's financial statements, regardless of the impact on reported earnings, and provide clear disclosures regarding the reasons for the write-down. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Topsports International, as a publicly listed entity, is subject to stringent regulatory oversight regarding its financial reporting and disclosure obligations. The pressure to meet investor expectations and maintain share price stability can create a conflict between short-term financial performance and long-term ethical and legal compliance. A careful judgment is required to navigate this tension, ensuring that all actions align with the company's fiduciary duties and regulatory requirements. The correct approach involves prioritizing transparency and adherence to accounting standards, even if it means reporting a less favorable short-term outcome. This aligns with the fundamental principles of financial integrity and regulatory compliance. Specifically, it upholds the spirit and letter of accounting regulations that mandate accurate and timely financial reporting, preventing misleading information from being disseminated to the market. This approach safeguards investor confidence and protects the company from potential legal repercussions and reputational damage. An incorrect approach that involves manipulating financial data to present a rosier picture would constitute a serious breach of regulatory and ethical standards. This could involve aggressive accounting practices that stretch the interpretation of accounting rules or outright misrepresentation of financial performance. Such actions undermine the reliability of financial statements, mislead stakeholders, and can lead to severe penalties, including fines, sanctions, and even criminal charges for individuals involved. Furthermore, it erodes trust in the company and the broader financial markets. Another incorrect approach, that of delaying the recognition of potential losses or liabilities, also violates accounting principles. Financial reporting requires the recognition of losses and liabilities when they are probable and estimable, not when it is convenient for management. Failing to do so distorts the financial position of the company, presenting an artificially strong balance sheet and income statement. This can lead to misinformed investment decisions by shareholders and creditors. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical conduct and regulatory compliance above all else. This involves 1. Identifying the core issue and potential conflicts of interest. 2. Consulting relevant accounting standards and regulations. 3. Seeking advice from legal and compliance departments. 4. Evaluating the potential short-term and long-term consequences of each course of action, with a strong emphasis on the legal and ethical implications. 5. Choosing the option that ensures full transparency and adherence to all applicable rules, even if it presents immediate challenges. Question 19. Examination of the data shows that Topsports International is considering acquiring a smaller, but strategically located, competitor in a key regional market. While this acquisition could significantly increase Topsports International's market share and potentially lead to cost synergies, there are concerns that it might reduce consumer choice and potentially lead to price increases for certain sporting goods. Topsports International's legal counsel has advised that the acquisition could fall under the purview of competition law, requiring careful consideration of its impact on the market. What is the most appropriate course of action for Topsports International in this situation, adhering strictly to Australian competition law and regulatory guidelines? Option A. Focus solely on the internal benefits of the acquisition, such as operational efficiencies and expanded distribution networks, and defer any external regulatory considerations until after the deal is finalized. Option B. Conduct a thorough market impact assessment to evaluate the potential for the acquisition to substantially lessen competition, and consult with the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, AC, regarding the proposed transaction. Option C. Structure the acquisition in a way that avoids formal notification to the AC, assuming that the combined market share will still be below certain thresholds that trigger mandatory reporting. Option D. Proceed with the acquisition immediately, as the potential for increased market share and cost synergies will ultimately benefit consumers through more competitive pricing and product development. The correct answer is D. Proceed with the acquisition immediately, as the potential for increased market share and cost synergies will ultimately benefit consumers through more competitive pricing and product development. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire to expand its market presence and the regulatory obligation to ensure fair competition and prevent monopolistic practices. Topsports International, as a significant player in the sporting goods market, must navigate these complexities with a keen understanding of the relevant competition law. The decision-making process requires careful consideration of market dynamics, potential impacts on competitors, and adherence to legal frameworks designed to protect consumer welfare and market integrity. The correct approach involves a thorough assessment of the proposed acquisition's potential to substantially lessen competition in the relevant market. This requires analyzing market share, barriers to entry, the nature of the products or services, and the likelihood of increased prices or reduced choice for consumers. Adherence to competition law, such as the Competition and Consumer Act 2010, CTH, in Australia, is paramount. This legislation aims to prevent anti-competitive conduct in mergers that would have the effect or likely effect of substantially lessening competition in a market. A proactive engagement with the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, AC, for pre-assessment or formal clearance, if necessary, demonstrates a commitment to regulatory compliance and responsible corporate behavior. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the acquisition without considering its competitive impact, relying solely on the potential for increased market share or economies of scale. This disregards the legal framework designed to prevent market distortion and could lead to significant penalties, reputational damage, and the unwinding of the acquisition. Another incorrect approach would be to assume that simply acquiring a competitor will automatically lead to efficiencies that benefit consumers, without robust evidence to support this claim. The law requires a demonstrable lack of substantial lessening of competition, not just a hopeful assumption. Furthermore, attempting to circumvent regulatory scrutiny by structuring the deal in a way that appears to avoid notification thresholds while still having a significant anti-competitive effect would be a serious ethical and legal failing. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes legal compliance and ethical conduct. This involves 1. Identifying the relevant legal and regulatory obligations, e.g., competition law. 2. Conducting a comprehensive impact assessment, including market analysis and potential competitive effects. 3. Seeking expert legal advice to interpret regulations and assess risks. 4. Engaging proactively with regulatory bodies where required or advisable. 5. Documenting the decision-making process and the rationale behind the chosen course of action. Question 20. Assessment of how a Topsports International marketing manager should respond when they inadvertently overhear a confidential discussion about an upcoming, unannounced product launch that could significantly impact the company's stock price, and they have a personal investment portfolio that includes Topsports International shares. Option A. Proceed with selling some of their Topsports International shares to mitigate potential losses, assuming the product launch might not be as successful as anticipated. Option B. Immediately report the overheard information to the Topsports International Compliance Department and refrain from any personal trading activity related to Topsports International shares until the information is publicly disclosed. Option C. Ignore the overheard information, considering it as casual office gossip, and continue with their regular investment strategy. Option D. Discuss the overheard information with a trusted financial advisor to get their opinion on whether to adjust their personal investment portfolio. The correct answer is B. Immediately report the overheard information to the Topsports International Compliance Department and refrain from any personal trading activity related to Topsports International shares until the information is publicly disclosed. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge for Topsports International employees due to the inherent conflict between personal financial interests and the duty to act in the best interests of the company and its stakeholders. Maintaining client confidentiality and avoiding insider trading are paramount ethical and regulatory obligations. The temptation to leverage non-public information for personal gain, even if seemingly minor, can lead to significant legal repercussions and reputational damage for both the individual and Topsports International. Careful judgment is required to navigate these situations ethically and in compliance with relevant regulations. The correct approach involves immediately reporting the potential insider information to the designated compliance officer or legal department at Topsports International. This action demonstrates adherence to the company's internal policies and external regulatory requirements designed to prevent insider trading. Specifically, it aligns with the principles of market integrity and fair dealing, ensuring that all investors have access to the same material information. By escalating the matter, the employee fulfills their obligation to protect the company from potential violations of securities laws and upholds the trust placed in them. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the information as insignificant and proceed with the personal investment. This failure to act would violate the duty of care owed to Topsports International and its shareholders, potentially leading to accusations of insider trading. It also disregards the company's internal controls and compliance procedures, which are established to mitigate such risks. Another incorrect approach would be to discuss the information with colleagues or friends before reporting it. This action breaches confidentiality and increases the risk of the information being inadvertently or intentionally leaked, thereby creating a wider circle of potential insider trading. It also demonstrates a lack of understanding of the seriousness of handling material non-public information. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to wait for further confirmation or clarification before reporting. While seeking clarity is often beneficial, in matters of potential insider trading, the precautionary principle dictates immediate reporting of any suspected material non-public information. Delaying the report, even with good intentions, can be interpreted as an attempt to benefit from the information before it becomes public, thus constituting a violation. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. This involves understanding company policies, identifying potential conflicts of interest, and knowing when and how to escalate concerns to the appropriate internal channels. A robust framework includes a commitment to transparency, integrity, and the protection of confidential information.